Boom. We are alive, ladies and gentlemen. Steel with the Arcane Bear. Thank you for joining us. It is an evening time here for me in Costa Rica. We are going to be chatting with Yusuf and Aaron. Yusuf is the group CTO for Animoca Brands, and Aaron is, I think, general project manager, if I remember correctly. It's late night here, though. Aaron, Yusuf, it's great to have you on this evening. How you guys doing?
We're doing fine. Thank you for having us.
Good to be here.
Perfect. So, gaming is new for me. Games have been around for a very long time, cross culture, cross language, borders, of every kind. So we've landed in this very unique time of where games and technology are finding a new place. Let's kind of start with that as a frame. Yusuf, tell us a little bit about games. We'll start really broad spectrum.
I mean, games, I think they are primarily a form of entertainment, right? And I don't have the numbers with me off the top of my head, but the gaming industry in particular, right? I remember a few years ago reading that it was generating as much revenue, if not more, than the film industry, right? Given the blockbuster titles, which basically release, right? I mean, a top tier game, AAA game, costs millions of dollars, hundreds of people to basically make, right? So it's also provides economic opportunities to a wide swath of people, right? They're basically artists, writers, voice actors. There's a whole gamut of people, who can basically enjoy. A game to be delivered to you, right, is basically has production work done across the world, right? And that for something which you even may think okay, this is a $15 game or sometimes a free to play game, may involve hundreds of people working to it. Gaming over the recent years, right, with the advent of esport, has moved into kind of a spectator sports where you could say top athletes are basically rock stars in their own right. You look at Fnatic and many other, esport things, Ampers in Asia, Mad Lions in I think Indonesia, someplace. I don't know the top esport teams. These League of Legend esport, tournaments. They have prize monies of millions of dollars with lots of sponsors getting out there. And in the last couple of years, right, blockchain has basically brought about a different model, which is play and earn, right, where the ability for basically using blockchain technologies and NFTs for players to hold digital assets and therefore then provide value into the ecosystem and be rewarded for it, right? A lot of people have been playing games, but your time has not been valued, right? You're basically playing money in the game, but other than entertainment, you don't get something out of it. There's nothing, you can't make that a career, right? Esport athletes, a very small of them can make a career, but with play and earn, and which is basically enabled by the use of blockchain technology, right? Because you can truly track who owns what, and you can have a secondary trading model. It allows for this type of things. So that's, I would say, the evolution of gaming from something which was passive to something which is now more active and generating yield in an organization, in basically the wider society.
So I've been thinking about some of these ideas and the participation reward, having a community be a net benefactor of the growth of any brand seems like a very positive feedback loop, because then you end up with some of the most staunch supporters effectively. And I look at a company, I take Red Bull as an example because they've got a very large balance sheet. They've spent like $3 billion a year or something on marketing and advertising. And I think to myself, well, what would happen if Red Bull just every year just gave that money back to its customers? Like you would have some of these outlandishly excited customers. And, so what I want to do is kind of peel this back a bit and look, because, you brought up esports, which is a kind of a value function, or the influencer model, which is another value function that's built along the game side. These are all kind of like wall gardens that keep it about the gaming sector. So people that are interested in games, people that are spending money on the games, and the people that are kind of like the commentators, but that the game makers effectively are generating a large amount of revenue, like Fortnite, there's tons, like billions of dollars in revenue from in-game app purchases. So one of my interests is how much money is something like on Fortnite would they spend, or how much are you like are companies generally interested in spending on like the give back models to their consumers? Because this seems like one of the clearest routes to explain why Web3 has worked so well, is that kind of interrelated participation reward.
I think there's no one true answer for that. I mean, it works. You cannot forever give away a lot, right? It also has to be like, it's a kind of like it's like an economy, like, you need to generate revenue to basically plow back that a percentage of it back in and keep a percentage back to evolve the game, right? Over time, you might get into a steady state, right? You may start off with more, emitting more rewards to basically attract a set of people. So it's a form of user acquisition, right? Rather than spending money like massively marketing, you're basically saying like, look, I'm going to basically give rewards, right? Which will be this, right? But there's more like seeding the community so that subsequently people can say like, okay, I feel it's a productive use of my time. If I spend X amount of hours on here, I think I can make X. Or if I don't make amount, if I don't have the time, then I can basically maybe rent out my assets to somebody else, like, who can make productive use of the time, right? All in all, every project has basically a token would have a allocation, which is, to the play and earn rewards, right? And we can talk about some of our games, like, Primate, I forget the numbers right now, like what percentage of the pool is basically allocated for play and earn, right? So that gives you a sense of how much, from a token, the number of tokens, if you take, like, that would give you a sense of like, this is the amount of money, organizations are willing to pull back, right? And I think every project would like to evolve into kind of a decentralized autonomous organization, a DAO, where ultimately it's the token holders which can decide like, okay, do we need to give more? Do we need to give less, right? A company, a project initiator can initiate it, right? But truly it is benefiting everybody if there is more widespread holders, right? So the wider the spread of holders, the more decentralized a project is, the better it is. Like, people basically feel like, look, it's not just completely one person can run and walk away, like, or going to turn off the flag, right? It increases the value, right? We want to get as many holders of the Primate token of our NFTs as much as possible, like,
So let's use Benji Bananas kind of as an example. Whether it's a decentralized company or whether it's a company headed by specific people. I think the interest is can the brand grow big enough, which is partially due to usually intellectual property. It's one of the things I found fascinating about Bored Apes was here is a clear piece of kind of intellectual property of the average Web3 participant, effectively, or even CryptoPunks. I think it was very reflective of those of us who grew up in like the Atari kind of first three, like the bit era, so it seemed reflective of the younger generation, like us getting older now as investors, also reflected in kind of like, I'll call it the meme art or the meme culture of the time. So I question some of these big brands, like what would happen if you owned like a Cartman in South Park's early days? Because part of it's not just the holding of the IP, it's about how value that IP becomes to the culture over a long period of time. Do you guys want to, what's your guys' thoughts around how IP and culture grows within the ecosystem too, aside from just the economy?
Yeah, maybe I can chip in here. I think, yeah, it's definitely interesting that you brought that up. And I think, it's also nostalgia, right? Us as kids growing up watching these shows or being in this culture and growing up with these characters. And then, when we get to, where we are now and we have, a bit more financial flexibility, and then we can actually invest in some of these projects that are coming up that kind of remind us of the times back then, or, what kind of made us. So I think it's really interesting that, we're in this phase where we do have the technology that's growing and building that enables you to have ownership of, these digital assets that is essentially a part of your identity or what you like to identify as, and that represents you, right? Hence, I think where profile pictures took off in NFTs and so forth. So, these are like badges of honor for people like us. And, we like to invest and we like to show, hey, I'm part of this subculture, I'm part of this culture. So, projects, opening up their IP for use is definitely a really new way of doing things, I think, in the past couple of years. And we've seen that kind of explode, right, with apes and with other projects that have sort of followed on. So it's been really interesting.
I guess another way to kind of further this thought would be, well, if let's put Benji just in an experimental container and look at it apart from everything else, what type of revenue, what type of scaling capability is in a game like Benji Bananas? And because I'm just like a company like Red Bull, I'm imagining, okay, we're making X amount of dollars, we give away $3 billion instead of doing marketing like this to people we know that are obviously participating within the ecosystem. Where does this really start to work, and where is it, like, are the breaking models in the economy, if this kind of thing as well? Yeah, it's kind of a vague question because I don't know how exactly to pose it, but like where do you think the break even and like flourishing models for something like this is, and what does it look like in terms of Benji Bananas? Does that make sense?
So I'm gonna basically say that Benji Bananas, we basically thought first in terms of like, while the game may feel coming up front and center, ultimately what I want to describe is that the primate token is basically the crux, the ecosystem, right? Benji, is the first game within the primate ecosystem. There will be other games, right? Aaron and I are basically working on other games which will join the primate ecosystem. And then, you may earn from Benji Bananas, and then basically you may be able to spend in NFTs which are utilized in the other game, like let's say XYZ game, like, so it's not all about like, hey, how much can Benji Bananas itself earn and everything, right? What can we do to grow the primate ecosystem so that holders feel that my involvement, right, whether they be an investor or whether they basically a yield, basically providing labor to basically get to generate yield for those investors, like, it would be across a series of titles, right? It's not going to be just Benji Bananas. Benji Bananas was basically, it's because we don't have multiple games right now, everything, Benji Bananas equals to primate. Like, I would say primate is more than Benji Bananas, right? We just haven't, we are hoping to position that shortly in that form, right? So it's that's what one key takeaway I'd like to explain to viewers and listeners of this conversation, like, that stay tuned. While Benji Bananas, we have plans for it, there'll be other games which will basically give utility to primate, where the membership pass would also provide where you could say the Benji Bananas existing membership pass, right, will basically be something which will basically provide utility in future games also. If that makes, Aaron, we are welcome to elaborate on this.
No, I think you covered most of it. Yeah, definitely.
So we bought ourselves a Benji Bananas membership. I played the game. I wish it was easier to get kind of past the first level. I didn't like it. Kept putting me back to the beginning. I was like, I want to make it past. Like, no, I didn't like it. That part threw me off. I was like, I keep on playing. I like the game. Even my girlfriend and I played the doubles part too. We thought that was highly entertaining. So how you scale an ecosystem, I think makes a lot of sense, especially with branding and how you'd want to bring the community in from a bunch of different layers. But, again, I guess part of my interest is, okay, we've got, how are you measuring Yeah, I guess it's basically where's the profit model that becomes the most synergistic with that ability to give back to the community and also build the ecosystem. Like, yeah, what does that economy look like? I'm not. I think about tokenomics and how some of the play to earn mechanisms or burning stuff would work, but where do you get to that community overload? Like how many people need to be playing Benji Bananas at what rate and what kind of expenditure kind of like to get the machine going? Because for me, I think it's like this is just like a machine, a community machine, right? That you want to get it generating as much positive feedback because then the branding grows and more people participate and there's more to give, so more people get excited about the thing that's interesting. So where's that? Yeah, what does that look like in terms of active monthly user community members? Or
I mean, today, I mean, forget. I mean, Benji Bananas itself maybe has like 50, 60,000 daily active users, right? If not more. Like, the game's been around for a while. Like, we've not
awesome.
actively marketed the game, right? But if we are successful, right, with our approach of basically adding more games, to the primate ecosystem, right? And a case in point being that you mentioned that you found this game difficult, right? So maybe there may be others like you who find this game difficult, right? Maybe a match 3 game is needed, or maybe a endless runner is needed, right? So there are different genres of game, right, where one can satisfy, right? There's never a
Okay.
one size fits all, like, right? So we can basically say what is the common thread. The Benji, the character is the common thread, right? So Benji type branding, but in different genres of game, right? Maybe some people basically want just a endless runner, right? Which is set basically in a jungle environment. That's as accessible, like, Subway Surfers, Temple Run. Those games have done very well, like, they fit also in a vertical orientation of a phone, right? So right
Yeah,
now
mobile.
Benji's landscape, maybe a vertical orientation type of game, right? It's
Mhm.
well known that women like Match 3, and you could say bubble shooter type games, like, uh, is that another genre we can basically look into? So Aaron and I, we are currently evaluating. We are close to kind of making a decision of what other games to basically bring it to the Benji family, the primate family, I would say, right?
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So it's not like, yeah, uh, we know that Benji has a certain user base, right? Those who like these physics type games, maybe timing the jump correctly, and there's some, who find it difficult, right? I mean, every game always has a niche.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's the incentive to want to like accomplish stuff or learn games too.
Mm,
I played music most of my early career, so the only thing I really have to compare it to is the net result of like spending hours trying to like move my fingers in a very specific function. I'm like, okay, this is kind of similar. I can see how there's a catch here. So part of this for me is that drive and the success of like, okay, I made it through the game. There's a reward in understanding like the playment, but also you brought up these kind of physics games, and one of my favorite, because I think back to when I was younger, because probably last time I played games before music was Worms Armageddon. Did either of you play this game?
I can't recollect playing that game. Maybe Aaron has.
Holy hand grenade. Yeah.
Yes, you could. So this kind of stuff is tons of fun. So I was imagining like shooting Benji at a bunch of places we could bounce around. So I see the suite of games. It makes a lot of sense. Well, so tell us a little bit about how that's been going so far. Tell us about the membership, and how the drop's been going so far. Yeah, like I said, we bought one. Everyone in this sector knows I love spending money on learning about this sector, because it's just always kind of baffled and surprised me. So tell us about how that's been going, and what you guys hope for the next future. Like, what's the roadmap look like?
Sure. Maybe I can kick off, and Yusuf, you can jump in. So earlier in March, when ApeCoin dropped, we launched the Benji Bananas membership pass NFT. So this was basically the first utility for ApeCoin where you could purchase a Benji pass with 25 ApeCoin. That was a very successful sale. And then, in April, we went on to launch the Primate token. So this is basically, as Yusuf mentioned, this is the lifeblood of our ecosystem, and what's to come. So in May and now in June, we've started to kick off the first drops. So we really wanted to reward our early holders of the Benji Pass, and we've been doing, telling people to start practicing the game, start swinging, practice your timing, and then here's a incentive to keep going. And then hopefully end of June or around July, we're going to start launching the play and earn mechanics. So basically this will be based on a couple of factors: endurance, timing, distance, your collection of bananas. We have all these metrics in the game that we can track and then, derive a score, which will essentially lead to your primate earnings. So the better the game you are, the more you'll earn a primate. So we have a lot of good players in our ecosystem. Actually, we see they share screenshots on Twitter, how far they've swung and what their top scores are. So it's really great to see the community that already love the game, and we want to reward and give back to them.
So how can we expect to see some of the like the Benji Banana lore develop as well? That would be kind of my next thought, because one of the things I've noticed about things that do really well are these deeply seated story tales that kind of come alongside it. Like Stardew Valley was one of these ones that stand out for me, where I was like, oh, this is just a fantastic. One of the reasons why I started to really like the gaming sector as I was going through it, because it's unlike social media, you can have these like kind of self-made wonders. Is there a Benji lore? Is there more in the storyline that comes through as well?
Yeah, I think we're definitely spending a lot of time to craft that. Benji's been around for a while, and there's definitely a lot of history with him. There's some Easter eggs you can find in the game already, like, Benji's girlfriend and so forth. What's going on there? So we have a lot of material to work with, definitely. And I think you'll kind of see that work its way into our future drops as well. So we are looking at, building more digital assets around this ecosystem. So, there may be new NFTs. It may be around different Benji characters. So I think that's all I'll say for now.
Yeah, I should hope so. I'm a big fan of them when they release really psychedelic levels. No, those would be my favorites. So one of the fun things about this is kind of the art and the directorship, and you guys have a broad spectrum of relationship to all the different games in Animoca's portfolio. Can you tell us a little bit more about like broad spectrum game development? I guess, yeah. What's that? This is such a new topic for me.
So game development, works at many levels. Like a lot of time it's, now and I would say, a lot of time initially was basically a passion of somebody to tell a story and utilize basically a certain familiar game mechanic, like, you could say Angry Birds, for example, like, the mechanic was effectively like a simple physics based, like, point, make sure it's like you feel you can have control, but the story is about like, okay, these birds which are angry trying to eat the pigs, like, or trying to eat the, destroy that, like, so that's one element, right? Now, brands have come in, like, whether it be like, movie brands like The Walking Dead, right? Or iconic brands like Hello Kitty, or other, everything else, like, they basically look at games as a way they can engage, right? Besides basically linear narratives of like film or television and everything, games are very interactive, right? So it's working very closely with a brand partner to basically say like what can basically engage their audience and feel them like, okay, this is more and more things about the brand they can basically, game has the technical element about basically working with a game engine. And over time, before everybody used to build their own game engines, like custom game engines. Right now, it's kind of coalesced into most organizations either would use Unreal or Unity, depending on the needs, like, and they would do that. hardware has gotten so much better now compared to a few years ago that, the quality of games which are now possible on mobile devices and phones or tablet devices are so much better, right? So people are basically incorporating new things, right? And augmented reality, I feel, is the next big thing. Like, uh, I've not yet seen, I mean, Pokemon Go aside, like, I'm looking for more experiences, right? We have a company called Pixelinks, which is an investee of ours, right? We've invested in them. I'm looking forward to what they're going to bring up in the intersection of augmented reality and music. So that'll be basically very, very, very cool. Like, what I want to see. Like, so that'll be gamification, music, augmented reality. And what I hear, it's coming very soon. Like, is there anything else, Aaron, you want to add?
Yeah, I definitely think we've seen a lot of rapid growth in the technology. Definitely, I think I agree with Yusuf where we're really looking at the experiences, right? And what these technologies can enable us to feel, to hear, to see. I think, yeah, we might still be a ways away from Ready Player One level of experience, but definitely we're on the right path there. And I think, yeah, as Yusuf mentioned, we've invested in a lot of different companies that are going to help us get there. And we definitely have a vision of bringing these kind of experiences to a larger user base.
Yeah, it seems like one of the interesting parts about the gaming sector too is because it's not as monopolized per se as like a Facebook or the social media sector where you just have these one giant conglomerates, because there's a certain amount of storytell and branding or like specific niching that really does well. Like there's like no clear idea that Stardew Valley would do great. Like if you'd show me these things, I'm like, I have no idea. Like we'll do nothing. That would have been my first guess, right? So clearly in terms of adoption, it's hard to tell what really kicks. How do you guys do product market testing for branding between you've got a bunch of you've got multiple studios that Animoca is working with. What's the conversation around like branding, I guess, in general? So some of these are hard questions because there's different games. I don't want to talk about one specifically too much because you work with multiple studios. So how do you kind of coordinate some of those bigger branding conversations?
So I would say if you look at Animoca brands, right, we've grown over the years by acquisitions. Like, we've acquired Enway, which is in San Francisco and Seoul, like, Gamey, which is in Prague, Sandbox, which is Paris, Argentina. To a large extent, Grease Monkey Games, Blowfish in Australia. These studios are working standalone. They have their own IP, right? What Animoca brands provide is basically, like a network effect, right? As more studios join in, right, they basically are able to tap in on to the existing community, right? So we and the existing community can be in the form of token holders, right? So we provide liquidity pools around different tokens, right? There'll be a primate ref, primate tower type of token, right? So that basically incentivizes people to coming in. I don't think there is an overarching brand across Animoca brands. Each studio looks at a specific title, right? For example, Enway is working on Power Rangers, so that brand is again defined by Power Rangers IP holder, right? Blowfish, which worked on Phantom Galaxy, which is a space MMO, right? With mechs and everything, that is their baby, right? We there's no central, central branding department on this, right? So that's the beauty of Animoca brands, that you could say we are providing a variety of titles across the group, right? So I mean, your question is good, but I think there is no reason. There is no reason to basically have like, okay, Animoca brands is always got to be known for a look which represents this. I would say no, right? In the end, it's basically even if you take Rev, which is one of our tokens, right? It has Rev Racing. It's got it's got MotoGP. It's got Formula E coming up. There's Stock Drift coming up. Very different types of games, different types of looks, right? But all anchored around a single token. Okay, so I would say the token is the common thread, is the common brand, right? Rather than because for some people brand brand equals to kind of a visual look, right? And I would say in blockchain Web3 gaming, it's something else. While I'm not underemphasizing by any means the desire for a look, right? That itself is one element, right? So, we have a certain look for Benji Bananas, right? But the other game may have a different look, maybe more 3D-ish, maybe different, maybe, or we could basically conceptualize Benji Bananas in Sandbox, and that would basically be Benji in Sandbox, and that would be voxelized.
No, it was, I think one of the ways I felt that would be a good analogy was like almost like a music label. Each of these studios and games are more like individual artists. So you get a branding mechanism that's kind of identified by each of the individual companies that are building, let's say, as you said, Phantom Galaxies with Blowfish Studios. And so I guess the other way to look at it too is there aims to get collaboration at different levels? Like, is there forms of collaboration between the different studios, or are they just almost entirely standalone in the way they produce?
No.
Okay.
To a large extent, collaboration exists, but I think creative direction, is driven by the studio, right? I mean, they know their audience, they know the genre best.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so there is to say that it's not that.
No, they're like artists. It makes a lot of sense.
So do I basically interfere in what Blowfish does? Absolutely not. Because
No,
you get good people and you let them do what they do best. That's always been the case. I think in general, if something is working, right, and for many of our games, let's say even Crazy Defense Hero for Tower, right, it's an anime type of look, and that has worked very well. That's not basically saying oh, we got to basically, doing sometimes we do collabs with other IPs and we can experiment around that. It's the nature of the game which decides the look, right? There's within even Pixel, one of our studios which we have, right, they have games which represent multiple looks because they work with multiple brand partners, right? So I think there is collaboration. We share best practices on distribution, on marketing, across the groups, so I think there's a lot of communication within the group, but it's ultimately the final call is always meant by the team on the ground. In the case of, let's say, Benji Bananas, it's basically Aaron and myself which make the call, right? Hey, this is what we want to do. We will take inputs from other ends, and we are likely to be influenced by them, right? But there's a trade-off that you can't basically say, let's make this a collective decision. Somebody's got to step up and say, I'm the benevolent dictator today.
Yeah, no, of course. Well, and with such a broad perspective there with how you might want to adapt and build a portfolio of companies. They may be working on their own individual thing, how they come together in the future. Like you're saying, this kind of just a general funding and or like a collaborative sense of ecosystem building. Because sometimes part of the conversation is they may have a great branding sense, but don't have a business or a financial sense. So, you're trying to usually help collaborate with partners in as many ways as possible. There's a lot of people that are great at building things, don't know anything about managing like business necessarily. So picking up the slack and helping in a bunch of areas. But I think the looking at it as standalone makes sense too, because Animoca maybe looks more like that record label. That's, they've got a bunch of really kick-ass individual artists there that can kind of pull their own weight.
Yeah, I mean, from a music analogy, you're probably right. And Aaron also has, a bit of music background, and he can probably relate to that, right? So you could say, Animoca, to some extent is like a record label, which each, artist, like, studio underneath having a certain genre styling, right? And the record label providing kind of a common thread, common services to SSP, like, so there's economies of scale, there's best practices, there's learnings, right? Hey, this is what worked, this is not what is not working, type of thing. And, those learnings evolve over time. What worked last year may not work this year, right? The market evolves, even the conditions right now, like, if we try to do X, it's like, hey, this worked before. Sorry, it's not working right now. You got to adapt. That's live operations, like,
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. When you're running experiments, you want to run a bunch usually. Especially if you're looking for a good signal, you want to make sure you really figured it out. So, I'm in general really excited about games and economies, ownership of IP through time, especially as some of a lot of people are really good at picking the next really cool thing, and you find out quite early, and we often get basically no reward for being there. So I'm really excited to see where this ecosystem goes. I guess with that, I'll also ask is what are you guys most excited about where this technology might bring us, and what kind of worries you the most about where we are today? Like what's the biggest mistakes we've made? It's a two-part question.
No, Darren. Okay, sure.
I think what really excites me is that essentially I think we're still early. A lot of the products or companies we see in the space are still creating the infrastructure, right? I mean, it's still early. We're still finding the best way to do things, looking at different products, services, what would bring the best user experience to our customers and to our players. So I think it's really exciting to be part of that and build that out and have these wonderful IPs to work with, like Benji Bananas or like the other assets we have under Animoca brands and our investees as well. So yeah, that really excites me that we can be part of something so early. I think same as what you mentioned, like usually you don't get rewarded for being early, but in Web3 it's not the case. I think it's really cool that we can build something together with our community as well. Yusuf, anything that excites you?
Look, we've seen, and I've been privileged enough to be with Animoca brands for a while, where we basically, you could say we started in 2018. That was a pretty bear market at that time, like, and NFTs were nowhere, like, basically, and we are investors in OpenSea also. So we've seen you could say the growth of OpenSea over time, like, not that many sales. And now, PFPs have opened up a certain range of sales, right? I would say that it's still early days for gaming NFTs to basically trade and circulate. Then, those products are still evolving, right? Mistakes, there are far too many to count. Like, our hope is that community bears with us and basically helps us learn and evolve. We have no intention to kind of like do this. I was like, oh, we purposely made this mistake. A mistake is a mistake. Like, we want to learn from it, like, and then adapt and say, hey, what is it that we can provide value? What is it? And I think they've been incredibly patient so far. Like, it's very rare that you see that people are literally giving you money and then waiting for months at times for the product to come in. Like, a lot of time people are like, okay, I'll only pay you when the product is done, right? It's only in Web3 I've seen that people are like effectively pre-ordering, right? Is pre-committing and basically saying like, look, I'm taking a bet. I'm buying this now. Maybe it'll grow in value. And some people are like, no, I can't hold this for long. And they've done it. So some people are happy. Like, we've had some reports of people basically saying like, hey, I basically had 100% return of my investment in a few weeks. Like, I bought my pass at this, you gave me this much coins. It's effectively paid for itself. Like, that's great. Like, so for them, for some, they've basically said, no, I've not got back my money. I'm like, okay, we in any you could say investment decision, right? It's you can't 100%, everybody's not always going to become a winner immediately, right? You want to get over time more value accrual into the system that it helps everybody.
You brought up something there. I think that's one of the thoughts I've been having lately is how we look at these economies, like how we would look at a primate token, because the legal side tries to argument that there's a security to some degree, but with a game specifically, it's very easy to use the idea of V-Bucks as technically a product of Fortnite. Right, regardless of how you measure or like the stability of that economy, effectively that's a product, and it makes it a drastically different way to look at. And you mentioned this idea of like kind of early stage funding. Now there's two parts to that. Now in early stage funding, if you're going through the route of the security, you are looking at the benefit of the growth of a company through revenues, which is entirely different than the growth of the economy itself, which is more of an interest or a network effect. And what I think is interesting here too is, a lot of people look at an investment probably because they don't understand the conversation. I think totally that's of how we've gotten here, because to me it looks more like, okay, how does the old system, the model that's currently functioning, like the V-Bucks, that's their product. And if I want to go and buy 1,000 V-Bucks before Fortnite's a big deal, and it's really a limited supply economy that's built, using these token generated contracts, that the interest of that economy effectively is where you see the growth. And it's not really the investment that's useful, because the utility, the reason one would want it is because you can use it in the game, like the primate token. I can spend in the game. This also adds to the utility conversations. Like right out the gate, I can take this thing, I can use it within an ecosystem, which also makes it more like the product that I think it really sits under, which is why I think that for the family out there, why I think that they've decided to go down the commodity route instead of with the CFTC, instead of the Securities Exchange Commission. Because in the video game world, like NFTs, these are products. People speculate about Rolexes after the fact. It doesn't make a Rolex security. So what's interesting to me is it's a two-part conversation. Number one is most of the time, sorry, I'm going to send me on a rant for a second, Yusuf, I apologize.
No.
Most of the time people can't participate in the early venture growth of a company. Like you take Netflix, you can buy the subscription, but you're regulated out from any of the upside growth. You can't spend $7 a month to own like a micro portion of Netflix growth. Whereas here, the built-in economy, because it's based off network effect interest, like how many people are focusing on the brand itself, you can have a value upside by being early. But you're still buying a product. You're buying an in-game currency with an arcade that someone may or may not play, right? But the future is, okay, well, if we get the branding right, if there's enough eyeballs on this economy and this arcade machine, what we see is this big user adoption and growth and a clear route to profitability, where V-Bucks it's a product. It's clearly a functioning product for them. They make a lot of money off that V-Buck, as far as I know. So I think what's interesting is that because most of the gamers are only getting feedback in terms of the influencers or the way that they can participate in esports. If you were to, even at the basic person, had they spent $12 a month on Netflix the entire time, into micro shares the entire time they've actually paid for Netflix, they'd have an extra like 250 grand. So this model, it's not just in the gaming model, it's anywhere where people should be rewarded for what's, I think, what's an in-currency product, which is the growth of the recognition of the brand. Anyways, kind of a long-winded rant there, but I think it's important that, I don't see these as investments technically. I see them buying early product and hoping like that the product, like the branding gets like you find the supreme or whatever. Because, companies are like this, but they rely on different functions, right? It's not, the IP of a game feels somewhat intangible, because there's no like perfection for a game, whereas like making a really good kombucha is probably a bit more like a science. Gaming seems like we're reliant on, okay, here's a few things that people really like, but the customer base is like, because again, there's just a few games I'm like, really, this did so well. Sorry, long-winded rant, I apologize for that, but it brought up one thing I wanted to clarify, or at least on my opinion, which is that both of these are not they shouldn't be looked at as investments for buying early product in something. How people speculate on it afterwards is entirely up to them. But okay, sorry. So my last kind of thought here was about just broad spectrum calls to action. What do you think people should be doing? I try to convince people to find jobs doing what they love, and then invest consistently in things they think are interesting. So that's how we're here. But what's your guys' like best recommendations for people out there right now listening?
I would say, I mean, for gamers who believe, there are many in the community who believe that games should be free of any form of cryptocurrency or anything, like, that, and, it's fine. Like, each person has their own opinion, right? But there's also, I would say, an undue and unfair backlash to games which are kind of enable, like, play and earn mechanics, like, and basically everybody sees them as this is a scam, and I feel that's unfair, like, and maybe for influencers, or they are privileged to live in developed countries where they do not understand how life-changing play and earn makes to gamers in emerging markets, right? They've never traveled to these places to see that and see that effective change, right? And I feel that it will coexist over time, right? I mean, this was the same thing when freemium games came up, and there was a huge backlash that's like, what is this microtransaction? Now everything's accepted, right? Or games can only be something you have to pay $60 upfront, right? But it's not sustainable, right? In many countries, that's a lot of money upfront, right? So you could say freemium games expanded the market. I believe that what blockchain gaming is doing is basically expanding the market, right? Expanding the market by basically making people who may be skilled, or maybe playing for fun. But if they play for fun and they realize that they have a talent and are able to kind of make a living, or it maybe even be a side hustle, right? Why not give them the opportunity to do so, right? Because it's a kind of a ripple effect through the entire economy, right? That's my take on it. Happy to, if you want to add anything, Aaron, go ahead,
Yeah, I agree with you, Yusuf. And I think my takeaway would be keep an open mind and explore and experiment. I think that's something I've been doing in the past couple of years, really jumping into crypto, into DeFi, into NFTs. You don't really get the full experience until you ape in, per se, and you just try things out, make mistakes, and then, yeah, you sort of get involved in the space. So that's been personally a really interesting journey for myself. So I'd encourage, people to just try new things.
Yes, we have a mantra we like to repeat around here, which is heads we win, tails we only, lose a little. Go out there, take a bunch of risks. Just make sure that you're not at risk for that risk that you're taking. I'm super excited to see where these go. We've got the Benji Bananas game. If you guys haven't downloaded yet, I highly suggest it, especially if you follow our channel. You're speaking to a bunch of really open-minded people that think that this is the future of games and ownership as well, for a multitude of reasons. I think you guys are in a very potentially amazing space, because it supercharges something that, again, games are cross-border, cross-culture, cross-language. Everybody likes playing some type of games, whether it's cards or soccer. I guess all that, maybe sports is maybe a bit off of we'll keep things from the field off of like the game table. But I think that there's a huge potential here, as you said, the kind of the shining moments of adoption through crisis, that because of that growth of brand and how many people play these games and the fact that they were never rewarded for, I guess, really any of the companies that grew, a small amount of something to someone who normally makes such a small, like I think in Sri Lanka, they make $70 a month right now. If you can supplement even $10 to $20, it's a significant percentage of someone's personal income over the course of a month. That's wild for me to think, for us to think about. And this idea of financial inclusion through like playing video games, and you can use your mobile minutes, and the high likelihood that most wallets in the future will have games of some kind in them. It makes a lot of sense to me. So I'm really excited to see where this goes. Happy to have a conversation with you guys. Again, Bear Family, if you haven't, I highly suggest the Benji Bananas games. I love the music. I wish it was a little bit easier. Maybe I just sucked. Yusuf and Aaron be telling me that they're just people like kicking ass that they get. I think I made it to level 3. I don't know. I'll take a screenshot. I'll let you guys know. And
okay,
again,
that's good.
Yeah, just for context, I was never interested in games, but I think that the games make a big difference in terms of adoption of this technology and really trying to proliferate. I would hate to say it because it's probably like a legal gray area, but financial services to people that just didn't have it, because they can find a way to participate in the ownership of these larger brand ideas. And I think that's just such a phenomenal a game changer for people that don't normally have any financial instrument at all. So I think it's a pretty spectacular space that we found ourselves in. So Aaron, Yusuf, I really appreciate the conversation tonight. Bear Family, thank you for joining as a whole hour. Gentlemen, we did a whole hour. Thanks for that. You let me go on a rant. I do apologize. Try not to usually rant. I try to just get the guest questions in there, but I want just the thought I was having lately.
That's great. I mean, look, when you're flowing your mind, it's best to get the thoughts out there. Thank you very much for having us on your community. Look forward to your community participating in Benji Bananas, and more importantly, the primate ecosystem. We hope to come back to you soon with some more things which we're cooking up. That would and stay tuned. That's all I'll say. Right. And once again, thank you, to the Bear community for having both myself and Aaron on this live stream.
Yeah, it's our pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. Well, tons of fun. Well, Bear Family, give us a thumbs up. I'm sure you enjoyed this content. Leave your thoughts, your questions, your comments. Yeah, big round of applause. Tons of fun. If you made it through the whole hour, I'm really impressed, because it was just about video games and kind of, I guess, a little bit of pontification at the end there on my part. Yusuf, Aaron, I think you guys are building a lot of really fun stuff. So we'll stay in touch, and we look forward to playing more fun ape games together.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.